It is a familiar name in Ontario politics, and now it's back with Doug Ford winning the leadership of the Ontario Progressive Conservatives after a wild ride at the leadership convention.
We took the first step in defeating Kathleen Wynne. The people of Ontario want the Ontario Liberals gone, and they deserve nothing less.
The entire leadership race has been one for the history books, with a scandal, then court injunctions, and major logistical errors. So can this party get everything in place before a provincial election coming up in June? Joining us with his take is Conservative strategist Jason Lietar. Good to have you here. We spoke at the beginning of this race. Yeah. We're talking now that it's all been decided. Are you surprised at the outcome?
I am a little bit surprised at the outcome. I think we all were, to be honest with you. I mean, I had the chances of 75-25 going into this thing, with Elliot winning and Ford probably a strong second place. But politics always surprises. And Doug Ford, I mean, you can never count this guy out.
The question today is, do you think he's the one to beat Kathleen Wynne?
Well, I think the polls say that he can beat Kathleen Wynne. We've got a historically unpopular premier. I mean, she's at like 18, 20%, 15%, whatever it is in the polls. And Doug Ford, although he's a polarizing figure, the polls all say that he can, or at least he's got a shot. So it's going to be an interesting campaign. I think it got a lot more interesting with Doug in the race rather than the race that we would have had with Christine. That's
okay.
For sure.
Speaking of interesting, this leadership convention and trying to decide the leader. I mean, it took. I think the total was 7 hours for a decision to finally be made, and even then, it took until yesterday for Christine Elliot to concede. Yeah. There were long delays. There were frequent, counting and miscounting, unaccounted votes, votes in the wrong ridings. What happened?
Well, I mean, you've got everything, a 6-week process, basically a 6-month process thrown out into 6 weeks, which I think made it more difficult. But here's the thing, right? You had somebody that was a very close second place. That was Christine Elliot. Her team, I think, fairly wanted to look at every ballot and make sure that they reviewed every ballot and make sure she actually lost. It's not hard to ever go to your candidate and say, hey, you got second place. I'm really sorry, especially when you think you went into winning. So I don't blame them. I understand it, but I got to say it made for a pretty tense Saturday. We
should read Christine Elliott's statement that came out late last night. After contemplating my review, I am confident in the results. I extend my congratulations to Doug Ford on a hard-fought campaign. Ontario needs a progressive Conservative government to finally defeat Kathleen Wynne. I look forward to running as a candidate. That was a bit of a surprise, on the team that will form the government on June 7th. People weren't sure if she didn't win, if she was going to run again.
Yeah, I got to say, I was a little surprised by that. I said on Saturday, I thought if she didn't win, she probably went back in the race. It's a huge thing for Ontario politics, though. She is fantastic. She's got a great record, and I'm really proud of her that she's going to be back in. I think actually it will help Doug Ford defeat Kathleen Wynne.
There's two jobs that this new leader has. One is to win the next provincial election, but the other one I would argue could be harder, and that is to fix what seems to be broken internally within the Ontario PC party. And for the second time, we've had a leadership race where sort of the party brass wanted one candidate to win, and they had their support behind it. Both times was Christine Elliot. Yeah. And twice now, the party has picked somebody else. So what does this say about the perception that the brass want to present to the public versus who's actually in their party?
Well, it's very interesting. A very close race both times. The last race actually wasn't that close. I mean, Patrick Brown won that one pretty handily. This one was very close, a very tight race, and it was right down the middle. In Toronto, each of them won some ridings. What Doug does is, his job is to bring the party together and to make sure that there's unity going into this election.
But there was disunity going into the election.
100%. Well, there was disunity going into this thing, and a leadership race actually is, you're fighting about who's going to be the leader, and this close result, 50.5 to 49.5, is an incredibly close result. I will say this: there's one thing that unites the party. It's that the party has to replace Kathleen Wynne. I think everybody's going to be behind Doug, and the fact that Christine's back running as a candidate is really going to help as well.
That second job that we talked about sort of unifying the party, you've got not only the leftover of what happened with Patrick Brown, who knew what and when,
sure,
and also what happened with this leadership convention. You've got thousands of people who weren't even allowed to vote, and I heard people on the weekend saying that's what I pay my money for membership for,
right,
to make these kinds of decisions. Thousands of them didn't get an opportunity.
Yeah, I know. I think there's going to be some disappointment coming out of that for sure, especially with such a close race. I'm not going to pretend that was a perfect process, and I think even the people that ran the process, Doug has promised a review of that process. I think that's going to happen, but I think most people are turning the page and saying, you know what? 80% of Ontarians want to get rid of Kathleen Wynne. That's what we're focused on. I think that's where the party is right now.
What in Doug Ford is best for this party?
Well, I got to say his authenticity is off the charts, right? That's the one thing about he's got a strong brand. He's got authenticity coming out, coming out the yin yang. This guy is, there's no pretense to Doug Ford. What he says is, he says what he thinks and he means what he says. I think that's going to be a refreshing change. I think he's going to bring a lot of interest to politics. The other thing about Doug Ford is in the key battleground areas of like Scarborough, Etobicoke, some areas of the 416, he's going to be competitive in places that the PC party hasn't been competitive in a long time. That's a big advantage for Doug.
Is he ready for the scrutiny that comes with being leader?
I guess we're going to find out. The one thing he does have a lot of political experience, and the Fords have had international scrutiny, not just Ontario scrutiny or Toronto scrutiny.
All right, fair enough. We will continue to chat throughout this process as we head towards June. Thanks so much, Jason.
Thank you.